Welcome to Miss Holly's podcast. If you're a parent, caregiver, or anyone who isn't supporting an individual on the autism spectrum, you are in the right place. Today, we're going to talk about important concepts in behavior. The concepts are reinforcement and determining the function of a behavior. Understanding how a behavior works and understanding why the behavior is happening gives us insight on how to support the child. So go make some popcorn and get a drink and listen in. These ideas make an impact, not in only the children's life, but the adult's life as well. Adults can always learn new skills in helping children navigate their behaviors, communications, and frustrations. So, what is reinforcement? Reinforcement can be both positive or negative. At its core, reinforcement is about increasing the likelihood that a behavior will continue. This happens by providing praise, rewards, or other desirable outcomes, such as attention or access to preferred activities that is done after the behavior occurs. For example, in my class, when children help clean up or help a friend, I use words of encouragement and say, "Wow, that was helpful. You picked up the books," right after I see a kind act. Some other examples of positive reinforcement include giving children stickers or other tangible rewards. However, I believe that the most meaningful form of positive reinforcement comes from within the child. Our goal is to support them in becoming kind, respectful, and responsible. And the internal growth happens when we give them opportunities to reflect and recognize their own strengths and feel proud about their actions. And I wanted to add a disclaimer. Even though it is called positive reinforcement, it does not always mean that it's good, but rather it means that something is added to keep the behavior going. Positive reinforcement is about building up helpful or desired behaviors by adding something that the child values. According to Autism Helps, the difference between reinforcement and bribery is that reinforcement comes after a task is complete, whereas bribery is offered before. Negative reinforcement, on the other hand, is when something unpleasant is taken away, which makes a behavior more likely to happen again. For example, a child might study to avoid getting a bad grade, or a child cleans a room to stop their parents from nagging. Negative reinforcement is about the removal. Punishment is different from reinforcement, however. Punishment is a negative consequence to a behavior. But like we have learned, every behavior has a reason or purpose, and our job is to find out why it is happening or occurring. There are two types of punishments, positive and negative, just like reinforcement. However, they are different. A typical type of punishment that you may have experienced growing up is when you are giving extra chores because you stayed out late. And an example of negative punishment is when you got your phone taken away because you spent too much time on your phone. Punishments are a quick fix, a band-aid, and do not teach new skills or help us understand the function of the behavior. So what is the function of the behavior? Now that we have covered reinforcement and punishment, we can talk about the function of behavior. The function is the reason a behavior is happening. According to Banks, the author of the article, How to Better Understand the Four Functions of Behavior, and behavior analysts, we generally group these purposes into four main categories: social attention, escape or avoidance, seeking access to tangibles or activities, and lastly, sensory stimulation. For example, two children, Amy and John, are playing in the sandpit. You notice Amy hitting John, and your first response is to tell her to stop or to punish her. However, just before Amy hit John, he took her shovel. While her action wasn't appropriate, it was her way of responding to the situation. In this case, Amy's behavior was trying to get access to something she wanted, a tangible item. So first, attention. A child might get on the table and start screaming during free play. The child wants attention, whether it's positive or negative. The person wants an interaction, eye contact, or to get a response out of someone. Escape or avoidance. The person wants to get away from something that might be too frustrating, too boring, too overwhelming, or just unpleasant. And then seeking to access tangibles, like Amy, she wanted her toy back. The person wants a specific item or an activity like a snack, toy, or more screen time. And lastly, sensory, mostly seen with children in autism and can be referred to as stimming. It happens because the behavior itself feels good or helps the person regulate their body, like flapping their arms. We need to understand why the behavior is happening in order to design effective interventions. So, how do we determine the function of the behavior? We observe, we use data, we interview, or if you're a trained professional, you might use a functional analysis. So, how can we properly observe? Well, we can watch the children interact, and that can give us a clue on why the behavior is happening. What happened right before the behavior? What happened right after? These patterns help us see that the behavior is achieving for the person. So, ABC data. ABC stands for the antecedent, what happens right before the behavior occurs, and then the behavior, what did the child do? What were their actions? And lastly, the consequence, what happens right after? And what did might have you done after? Having this information helps us see the pattern. Once the function has been labeled, we can move on to designing a plan that is tailored to the child. For example, if the child is hitting because they want attention, we can start giving them more positive attention and teach them positive ways to get attention, like raising their hand or tapping us on the shoulder. If the person wants to escape, we can create a cozy corner that they can go to and not be disturbed. If they want access to items, we can teach them how to hold out their hand, or if they have the words, how to ask for that turn. If it is sensory, we can provide them ways to meet that sensory need in an appropriate way. Well, I hope that this episode gives you insight on reinforcement and the power of the function of the behavior. We all know that pun. When we assume, you know the rest. We are all trying to communicate one way or another, but some just need a bit more support. If you found this episode helpful, feel free to share, like, and subscribe. Until next time, take care and figure out the function.